What does a grieving daughter do when her parents are murdered? 4. 17-year-old TikTok personality Sarah Grace Patrick. The answer seemed, at first, to be heartbreak in public view, tearful videos, trembling hands, captions about losing everything, and private messages sent to true crime influencers, begging them to help find the person who did this. But police now say it was all a chilling act. Behind the crying videos and desperate pleas, detectives claim, stood not a devastated victim, but the alleged killer herself. Sarah, barely old enough to graduate high school, is now accused of committing one of the most shocking family crimes in recent memory, the cold-blooded murder of her own mother and father in their quiet Georgia home. And now, the case has reached a pivotal moment, a bond hearing that could decide whether she walks free while awaiting trial, or spends the rest of her pre-trial days behind bars. The story is disturbing on its own, but what has captivated and unsettled the public is the strange way it unfolded. This wasn't just a crime scene hidden away from view. It was a case broadcast in real time on TikTok to an audience of thousands. In the days following her parents' deaths, Sarah's videos painted a portrait of a shattered teenager, red-rimmed eyes, shaky voices, claims that she was terrified. But to investigators, these were not signs of grief. They were signs of performance. They point to inconsistencies, timelines that don't add up, and subtle clues that, in their eyes, exposed her as the prime suspect. This is more than a legal battle. It's a psychological puzzle. Was Sarah playing the role of a mourning daughter for sympathy? Or is there still a part of this story we haven't been told, one that could flip the narrative on its head? Prosecutors argue that her behavior, after the killings, from contacting online creators to shaping her own victim's story, was part of a calculated attempt to deflect suspicion. Defense attorneys, however, insist that the teenager is being painted unfairly, that police rushed to judgment, and that Sarah's social media activity was nothing more than a young woman trying to process unimaginable loss in the only way she knew how. The bond hearing now looms large. If the judge grants her release, Sarah could return to social media, potentially influencing public perception before the trial even begins. If denied, she will remain in custody, a reminder to the community that, in the eyes of the law, she remains a serious danger. This is where emotion meets evidence. It's where the performative nature of online life collides with the cold realities of the criminal justice system. And it's where every detail from her facial expressions in a TikTok clip to the exact wording of her messages could become part of the prosecution's or defense's arsenal. As this case unfolds, one question lingers: how do we separate genuine grief from a chilling performance? Because if police are right, Sarah Grace Patrick wasn't just telling her followers a story, she was living a double life, with an audience watching every move. Today, we'll take you inside the investigation, the interrogation that sparked controversy, and the legal strategies both sides are preparing for this high-stakes hearing. From the quiet suburban street where tragedy struck, to the digital stage where millions now dissect every frame of her videos, we'll explore the strange, unsettling, and tragic journey of a teenager who may have turned the performance of grief into something far darker. The crime and the bizarre aftermath. In the morning of February 20th, 2025, a nightmare began inside a quiet home in Carroll County, Georgia. The day started like any other in the rural neighborhood until a young child made a discovery that would forever shatter her family and stun the community. Inside the master bedroom, 41-year-old Kristen Brock and her 45-year-old husband, James Brock, lay motionless in their bed. Both had been shot to death. The scene was grim, the air thick with the stillness of something unspeakable. It wasn't a neighbor, a police officer, or even an adult family member who found them. It was their 5-year-old daughter, wandering into the room in the early morning light, confused as to why Mummy and Daddy wouldn't wake up. Her little voice would echo in the nightmares of first responders. They won't get up. Shaken and afraid, the child's cries woke the household's older daughter, 16-year-old Sarah Grace Patrick. It was Sarah who picked up the phone and dialed 911, reporting the deaths in a voice that at the time seemed panicked and disbelieving. That call triggered what would become a months-long investigation, one that started as a gut-wrenching tragedy and spiraled into something darker, stranger, and far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. A picture-perfect family. On the surface in Carroll County, Kristen and James Brock were well-known and well-liked. Both were active in their local church, Friends described Kristen as warm, maternal, and always willing to help a neighbor in need. James was remembered as hardworking, dependable, and fiercely protective of his family. The Brocks were the kind of people who showed up with a casserole when someone was sick and opened their home to friends during hard times. They were raising 2 daughters, working steady jobs, and as far as anyone knew, living a quiet, respectable life, which is why their sudden and violent deaths sent shockwaves through the small community. Vigils were held, fundraisers were organized, neighbors hung ribbons and left flowers at the edge of the Brock family property. The question on everyone's mind was the same: who could possibly want them dead? The first red flags from the very beginning. Investigators noticed details that didn't quite add up. For one, there was no sign of forced entry. The door wasn't kicked in, and no windows appeared broken. Police suggested that the killer either had a key or was let in willingly. This single point immediately shifted the tone of the investigation, from the idea of a random home invasion to something more chilling: an inside job. Adding to the mystery was the missing murder weapon. Despite a thorough search of the property, the gun used in the killings was nowhere to be found. In murder cases, a missing weapon often points to a killer who not only knew the victims, but also had time to carefully remove evidence. The official police statements hinted at these concerns, though the Brock family, particularly relatives of Kristen and James, strongly disputed some details. They insisted the house may have been entered without permission, and that the case wasn't as simple as police were making it seem. Still, the lack of forced entry and missing weapon remained powerful pieces of the puzzle. A public display of grief or something else? In the days following the murders, friends and neighbors expected the surviving daughters to retreat into private mourning. But Sarah Grace Patrick, the 16-year-old who had called 911, did something completely unexpected. She turned to TikTok. Almost immediately, Sarah began posting videos and photos about her parents' deaths. She shared smiling family portraits and candid shots of her mum and dad, overlaid with emotional captions like, "I miss you guys, save a seat for me in heaven." Another post read, "They'll never see me graduate, they'll never walk me down the aisle." In one especially heart-wrenching message, Sarah wrote about the guilt she felt that her little sister had been the one to find their bodies. "I can't help but hate myself because I didn't wake up to find them before my 5-year-old sister had to see them like that." The posts were raw, intimate, and soon went viral. Strangers from across the internet flooded her comments with sympathy, prayers, and messages of support. Sarah's follower count began to climb. She was interviewed by a few small social media creators. She messaged larger true crime influencers, urging them to get the story out there so the killer could be found. To the outside world, she seemed like a tragic figure, a teenage girl thrust into unimaginable pain. The investigation turns, but while Sarah's online audience saw a grieving daughter, investigators began to see something else. Detectives pored over her statements, her timeline of events, and even her social media activity in the hours and days before the murders. They began to note inconsistencies, details about where she was when she heard the shots, about the timeline of her mourning, about how quickly she began reaching out to influencers after the tragedy. More troubling still was the impression that her grief, while public and emotional, was oddly performative. It wasn't just that she posted about her loss, it was the frequency, the framing, and the way she interacted with strangers online. Police began to suspect that these posts weren't just a coping mechanism, but part of a calculated attempt to shape public perception. And then came the whispers, unconfirmed at first, that Sarah might not just be a witness, she might be a suspect. The suspect emerges as weeks passed. Investigators gathered more evidence. Forensic analysis, witness interviews, and digital data collection began to focus sharply on Sarah. Friends described her as charismatic, but sometimes secretive. Detectives quietly began to build a case, suggesting that the teen herself could have been the shooter, the very person she was publicly mourning. The motive, still unclear, but prosecutors would later hint at family tensions, disagreements over rules, and even financial disputes that may have escalated into something deadly. By the time her arrest was announced, the public was in shock. Many of her followers, the same people who had written messages of love and support on her TikTok videos, now flooded her comment sections with disbelief and anger. The bizarre aftermath of the case was already unsettling, but what made it truly bizarre was the collision of a small-town double homicide with a massive social media stage. Sarah's online content, once a source of comfort for her and her audience, was now evidence. Screenshots of her posts were circulated in news reports. Clips of her videos were dissected by armchair detectives. Every blink and tear scrutinized for signs of deception. Legal experts began debating in the media whether her TikTok behavior was genuine grief or a chilling performance. Was she attempting to create a narrative of innocence? Was she trying to manipulate public opinion ahead of the investigation? Or was this simply how a teenager raised in an era of constant digital sharing processed her trauma? The high-stakes Bond hearing, and now, months after that tragic February morning, the case has reached a critical turning point. Sarah Grace Patrick's bond hearing. At stake is nothing less than her immediate freedom. If granted bond, Sarah could walk out of jail while awaiting trial, possibly returning to social media and shaping her own narrative in real time. If denied, she will remain behind bars, facing the long and isolating wait for a trial date. For prosecutors, the hearing is about public safety. They argued that releasing Sarah would pose a risk, both to others and to the integrity of the investigation. For the defense, it's about due process, the right of a young defendant to prepare for trial outside the confines of a jail cell. The outcome will not just decide where Sarah spends the next several months, it could also influence the tone of the trial, the public's perception of her, and even the jury pool. A story that blurs the lines. The murder of Kristen and James Brock began as a local tragedy, but as details emerged and as Sarah's social media presence exploded, it became something more. A case about truth and image, about grief and performance, about the uneasy overlap between real life and the digital stage. As the bond hearing approaches, one question remains at the heart of it all. Was Sarah Grace Patrick a heartbroken daughter seeking justice, or a calculating killer performing for an audience? Whatever the answer, this case serves as a chilling reminder that in today's world, the boundary between reality and performance can be frighteningly thin, and sometimes the most disturbing crimes play out in plain sight, one viral post at a time. The investigation and the TikTok trail. While Sarah Grace Patrick was crafting an image of herself online as a devastated daughter, eyes red from crying, captions dripping with grief, law enforcement agencies were quietly building an entirely different picture. Behind the scenes, the Carroll County Sheriff's Office, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, GBI, and even the FBI were deep into what they would later describe as a relentless investigation. Detectives weren't just sifting through fingerprints or shell casings. They were dissecting the digital life of the teenage TikToker, frame by frame, comment by comment. From day one, Sarah's online activity stood out. While it's not unusual for grieving teenagers to post tributes or share memories, Sarah's posts had a strange dual tone. Heartbroken victim and case promoter. She didn't just want sympathy, she seemed to want traction. The Reach Out campaign. Within days of the murders, Sarah began contacting true crime content creators on TikTok, Instagram, and other platforms. These weren't casual interactions. She was direct, almost transactional. One prominent true crime influencer, with hundreds of thousands of followers, shared that she received a blunt message from a user named Sarah Grace. It simply read, "Search up Brock case." There was no preamble, no please or thank you, just an instruction. In later messages, Sarah allegedly went further, suggesting that media coverage of the murder would be a really big hit. The phrase sent a chill through those who later read the exchanges. To them, it didn't sound like a grieving daughter desperate for justice. It sounded like a budding content strategist trying to market a crime, engaging the public and themselves. Sarah didn't stop with private messages. She actively commented on videos about the case. When one TikTok user speculated that the killer must have known the victims, Sarah's account chimed in with, "Most definitely was, since they knew the house." At the time, this may have seemed like harmless speculation from a family member, echoing what police themselves had suggested about the lack of forced entry. But in hindsight, investigators saw it differently. Was Sarah dropping insider knowledge, or was she blending in with public discourse to appear like just another bystander? These small interactions were being archived by investigators. Every comment, every DM became part of a growing digital evidence file. One detective would later call it a mountain of evidence that Sarah herself built, one post at a time. The funeral performance, the surveillance of Sarah's public persona extended beyond TikTok. When the day of her parents' funeral came, mourners packed the local church, tissues in hand, ready to comfort the two surviving daughters. Sarah stood at the podium, voice trembling, eyes wet, as she addressed the crowd. She said the words, "I'm sorry," multiple times. For some, it was clearly an expression of grief, perhaps apologizing for being unable to save her parents. But for investigators, trained to pick up on subtle cues, it raised an eyebrow. Was this genuine sorrow, or a subconscious confession? Experts in forensic psychology have long studied slips of the tongue in high-stress moments. To law enforcement, Sarah's repeated apologies could not be ignored. They reviewed the footage again and again, noting her posture, tone, and timing. Family history. As the online investigation unfolded, the on-the-ground detectives were digging into the family's past. What they found was a fractured history that, while not proof of murder, provided a troubling context. Court documents from several years earlier revealed that Sarah's biological father, Daniel Patrick, had been locked in a bitter custody battle with her mother, Kristen Brock. Allegations were thrown on both sides, claims of unsafe environments, disputes over visitation, and heated exchanges that spilled out into legal filings. The custody fight had ended with Kristen retaining primary custody, but the wounds, emotional and psychological, had never fully healed. In a small town, histories like this linger, in the background, whispered about but rarely forgotten. For investigators, this complex family dynamic added another layer to their theory. Here was a teenager living in a blended and sometimes tense home environment. If there were simmering resentments, could they have boiled over into violence? Digital forensics, the new crime scene by this point. Sarah's TikTok trail had become just as important as the physical crime scene. The murder weapon was still missing, but in the age of smartphones, digital footprints can be just as damning. The GBI's cyber unit went to work, pulling metadata from Sarah's posts, times, geolocation tags, and even drafts she hadn't posted. They combed through her direct messages, not just to influencers, but to friends, acquaintances, and strangers. What they found, according to leaked reports, were oddly timed communications, messages sent not in the throes of panic, but in the measured hours afterward. Her conversations sometimes shifted rapidly from expressing grief to discussing trending topics or other unrelated matters, as if her emotional state could be switched on and off. The psychology of performance law enforcement didn't just rely on hard data. They brought in behavioral analysts to examine Sarah's TikTok videos and public statements. Experts noted that her presentation often followed a pattern, a sudden shift into teary vulnerability, a dramatic pause, and then a plea for attention, either for the case itself or for her page. One investigator reportedly said, "It was as if she was producing a series, and each post was an episode." Was this simply the way a teenager raised in the influencer era processed grief, turning every life event, even tragedy, into content? Or was it something more sinister? The calculated manipulation of an audience to cover a crime. Public sympathy begins to crack as whispers of Sarah's possible involvement began to leak through local gossip and online speculation. Public opinion shifted. The same followers who had once filled her comments with hearts and angel emojis started to ask harder questions. Why was she reaching out to influencers so aggressively? Why did some of her statements seem oddly detached? And why was she always the center of the narrative, rather than her late parents? To the prosecution, this shift in perception was critical. The more the public doubted her, the less likely she could sway a potential jury pool with her social media persona. All roads lead back to Sarah despite the complicated family history and the possibility of other suspects. Investigators kept circling back to Sarah, the lack of forced entry, the missing weapon, the insider-like comments online, the behavioral cues in her funeral speech. Each piece alone might have been explainable, but together they formed what police saw as a damning mosaic. The girl publicly pleading for help was, according to law enforcement, the prime suspect all along. Her online presence, meant to amplify her voice, had instead amplified the case against her. And as the digital trail converged with physical evidence and witness statements, the question was no longer whether Sarah would be charged, but how much of her own online content would come back to haunt her in court. This was no longer just a murder investigation. It was a study in the dangers of overexposure, the way the internet can serve as both a stage and a trap. And for Sarah Grace Patrick, every post, every comment, every carefully chosen word was now potential evidence, not of grief, but of guilt. The arrest and the charges, the widening gap between Sarah Grace Patrick's carefully curated public persona and the reality of the police investigation finally collapsed in early July 2025. For months, Sarah had been publicly performing the role of the grieving daughter, a teenager who had lost her parents in a brutal double homicide, crying on TikTok, posting sentimental tributes, and urging the internet to find the killer. But behind the scenes, the Carroll County Sheriff's Office, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and the FBI had been meticulously piecing together a case, not against some unknown intruder, but against the very girl the public had been feeling sorry for. The day the illusion shattered it was July 8, 2025, when the investigation moved from quiet evidence collection to an open, irreversible accusation. That morning, the Carroll County Sheriff's Office obtained formal warrants for Sarah's arrest. The decision was not made lightly. Authorities knew that taking a 17-year-old into custody for murdering her own parents would ignite public shockwaves. But in their eyes, the evidence had reached a tipping point. Instead of a dramatic, televised arrest, Sarah turned herself in. She arrived at the sheriff's office accompanied by her father, Daniel Patrick, the same father who years earlier had been embroiled in a bitter custody battle with Sarah's mother. Kristen Brock. Her surrender was calm. There were no handcuffs in a parking lot, no shouted exchanges, but the weight of the moment was crushing. Sarah Grace Patrick, the teenage TikToker whose videos had once attracted thousands of sympathetic viewers, was now formally accused of being a double murderer. The charges: felony murder and aggravated assault. The charging documents were staggering for someone so young. 2 counts of felony murder, 1 for each parent. 2 counts of aggravated assault, again, 1 for each victim. Under Georgia law, felony murder is one of the most serious charges possible. It applies when someone causes the death of another person during the commission of a felony. In this case, the alleged shootings, it does not require proof of premeditation in the same way first-degree murder does. But prosecutors here are clearly treating the case as intentional, targeted violence. The aggravated assault charges suggest that prosecutors believe Sarah committed an additional criminal act beyond the killings themselves, possibly involving the use of a deadly weapon in a threatening manner. Before the murders were completed, each of these counts carries decades-long sentences if convicted, charged as an adult. What that really means, a critical turning point in this case, is the decision to charge Sarah as an adult. In Georgia, the law draws a sharp line between how juveniles and adults are treated in the justice system. Normally, juveniles are shielded from public exposure and face a focus on rehabilitation over punishment. Their cases are heard in juvenile court, their records sealed from public view. But there are exceptions, and murder is the biggest one. Georgia law states that anyone 13 years or older who is accused of certain violent felonies, including murder, can be automatically transferred to Superior Court. There, they are treated as adults in every respect: public proceedings, potential sentencing, and prison placement. Because Sarah was 16 at the time of the crime and is accused of 2 murders, there was no debate. Her case went directly to adult court. This decision changes everything. If convicted, Sarah would not be sent to a juvenile detention facility with counseling and a path to release at 21. Instead, she faces the same sentencing guidelines as a fully grown adult, which in Georgia could mean life in prison without the possibility of parole. The mountain of evidence so far. The sheriff's office has been tight-lipped about the specifics of its case. They have not released details about the murder weapon's recovery, forensic findings, or eyewitness accounts. What they have said is that their case is built on a mountain of digital and physical evidence, and they've made it clear that Sarah's own online behavior is a massive part of it. Every TikTok video, every direct message to a true crime influencer, every comment on a video about the case, all of it, investigators say, paints a picture not of a desperate daughter begging for justice, but of someone attempting to control the narrative while knowing the truth all along. The prosecution's theory is that Sarah's online campaign, urging creators to search the Brock case and telling one influencer it would be a really big hit, wasn't just tone-deaf. It was a performance designed to mask her own guilt and distract the public from suspecting her. From social media star to criminal defendant, in the span of a few months, Sarah's identity transformed in the public eye. When the story first broke, In February, she was a symbol of tragedy, a teenage girl robbed of her parents, left to care for a younger sibling, facing the unimaginable. Her videos drew in strangers from across the country, offering love and sympathy. By July, those same videos were being played on news broadcasts as exhibits of suspicious behavior. Clips that once drew hearts and angel emojis were now being paused, analyzed, and replayed by both the media and prosecutors. Her follower count stopped climbing. Instead, her comment sections filled with accusations, questions, and outright hostility. "You fooled us," one user wrote. All those tears were fake. The defense's position Sarah's defense team has been measured in their public comments, aware of how explosive this case has become. While they have not revealed their full strategy, they've hinted that they will challenge the interpretation of her online activity. To them, Sarah's TikTok posts were simply the modern expression of grief. Teenagers today live online. They share everything, from birthdays to breakups to tragedies. The defense is likely to argue that posting videos was Sarah's way of coping, not an admission of guilt. They are also expected to scrutinize the quality and reliability of the digital evidence. Social media comments can be misinterpreted, they will say, especially when pulled out of context. The prosecution's goal, the prosecution, however, seems confident. Their approach will likely be to weave together a digital timeline showing Sarah's actions before, during, and after the murders, connecting her online activity to physical evidence from the crime scene. They will point to her comments suggesting the killer knew the house as insider knowledge. They will show how quickly she began promoting the case to influencers, and they may even bring in expert witnesses to analyze her funeral eulogy for signs of deception or subconscious guilt. The stakes could not be higher, because Sarah is being tried as an adult. The stakes are as high as they can be for a 17-year-old. If convicted on all counts, she could spend the rest of her life in a Georgia prison, possibly without parole. That means growing into adulthood, middle age, and possibly old age behind bars. On the other hand, if the defense can successfully undermine the prosecution's evidence and convince a jury that the investigation was built on misinterpretation and circumstantial clues, Sarah could walk free, and the real killer, in that scenario, would still be out there. A case that captivates and divides. The arrest has divided the public. Some see it as the tragic downfall of a troubled teen. Others see it as justice finally catching up with someone who thought she could outsmart the system. Either way, the case of Sarah Grace Patrick is no longer just a heartbreaking story of loss. It's now a high-stakes legal battle where every word, every gesture, and every second of video could tip the scales toward freedom or life in prison. And as both sides prepare for the next phase, the fight over whether Sarah will remain behind bars while awaiting trial, the world watches, still stunned at how the smiling, grieving TikToker at the center of this tragedy became the prime suspect in her parents' murders. The new development, the bond hearing, the courtroom drama in the Sarah Grace Patrick case is about to reach a decisive moment, one that could change the entire trajectory of her fight for freedom. A motion for bond has been filed on her behalf, and a hearing is scheduled to take place soon. While the public has been fixated on the shocking allegations and the bizarre online behavior that preceded Sarah's arrest, this upcoming hearing shifts the focus to a more immediate and practical question. Will Sarah spend the months or possibly years leading up to her trial behind bars, or will she await her day in court from the outside world? What a bond hearing really decides at its core. A bond hearing isn't about guilt or innocence. The judge won't be deciding whether Sarah murdered her parents. Instead, the purpose is risk assessment. The court's job is to determine whether releasing her before trial would pose an unacceptable risk to public safety, to the legal process, or to her own likelihood of appearing in court when required. Georgia law sets out three main factors that a judge must consider. Flight risk. Is there a real possibility the defendant will flee the jurisdiction to avoid prosecution? Danger to the community. Would releasing the defendant put others in harm's way? Obstruction of justice. Is there a risk that the defendant could intimidate witnesses, destroy evidence, or otherwise interfere with the case? For Sarah, each of these will be fiercely debated. The prosecution's case against Release the District Attorney's Office will almost certainly argue for denial of bond. Their argument will be built on a few central pillars. 1. The violent nature of the charges. Sarah is facing 2 counts of felony murder and 2 counts of aggravated assault. The fact that these are violent, capital-level charges will weigh heavily against her. In the eyes of the court, the more serious the crime, the greater the incentive to flee. 2. Public safety concerns. Prosecutors are likely to argue that someone accused of murdering both of their parents, allegedly in their own home, poses an inherent danger to the community. They may point to the execution-style nature of the killings or details from the investigation that suggest planning, manipulation, or a lack of remorse. 3. A manipulative character. Sarah's widely discussed social media behavior, her TikTok videos, her DMS to true crime influencers, and her online commentary will likely be reframed by prosecutors as evidence of her ability to manipulate perceptions. If she could allegedly stage a convincing public display of grief while hiding her guilt, the argument goes, she could also deceive or intimidate witnesses if set free. 4. The impact on a key witness. One of the most compelling points for the prosecution will be the safety and emotional well-being of Sarah's younger sister, who is believed to be a key witness. Allowing Sarah to be released, they may argue, would cause distress to this sibling and could create opportunities for indirect or direct influence on her testimony. The defense's push for release. Sarah's legal team, on the other hand, will push hard for bond, albeit with strict conditions that could make the judge more comfortable granting it. 1. Innocent until proven guilty. The defense will remind the court that the presumption of innocence applies. Sarah has not been convicted of anything, and keeping her in jail before trial, they'll argue, amounts to punishing her without a verdict. 2. Voluntary surrender. One of their strongest points will be the fact that Sarah turned herself in. On July 8th, she walked into the sheriff's office with her father rather than trying to run or hide. To the defense, this is clear proof that she has no intention of fleeing. 3. No prior criminal record. Sarah has never been arrested before. No history of violent behavior. No juvenile offenses on record. They will present her as someone who has lived in the same community her whole life, surrounded by family who are ready to supervise her closely. 4. Strong family and community ties. The defense is expected to highlight the support of her father and grandfather, who are willing to take responsibility for her if she's released. They might even present a home confinement plan, with GPS ankle monitoring, curfews, and limited internet access, to reassure the judge she'd be under constant watch. 5. Questionable police conduct. Perhaps most importantly, they may raise the issue of Sarah's interrogation. Her father has publicly claimed that police questioned Sarah when she was just 16 without a parent or lawyer present. If true, this could be a violation of her constitutional rights, and the defense will argue that such conduct casts doubt on the strength and fairness of the state's case. The stakes for both sides' bond hearings in cases like this can have enormous strategic implications. If the judge denies bond, Sarah will remain in jail until trial, possibly for over a year. Given the complexity of a double murder case, this would limit her ability to meet freely with her legal team, access resources, and personally participate in preparing her defense. If the judge grants bond, would be a significant victory for the defense, allowing Sarah to work on her case outside a jail cell. It would also send a subtle message to the public and potential jurors that the court is not convinced she poses an immediate danger, a message that could confluence perceptions down the road. The judges, balancing act judges in murder cases, know that their bond decisions are under a microscope. Granting bond and then seeing the defendant commit another offense or flee could be career-ending. Denying bond in a case where the evidence is later revealed to be weak could draw public outrage about pre-trial incarceration. In Sarah's case, the judge will have to weigh the severity of the charges very high, the strength of the state's evidence publicly unknown, the risk to the community focused especially on her younger sister, her past conduct, no criminal record, voluntary surrender, possible legal issues with the investigation, the interrogation, controversy, public reaction and media pressure. This hearing will likely draw a packed courtroom. Local journalists, national outlets, and possibly even true crime podcasters who once sympathized with Sarah will be present. The public is deeply divided. Some believe Sarah is a cold-blooded killer who should not be allowed to breathe free air before trial. Others believe she is a victim of flawed police work and deserves a chance to live at home while awaiting her day in court. Every facial expression, every word from Sarah, and every argument from the lawyers will be scrutinized by both legal analysts and the court of public opinion. What happens after the decision if bond is denied? Sarah will remain in the Carroll County Jail. Her legal team may file an appeal of the bond ruling, but appeals are often long shots in serious murder cases. If bond is granted, the terms will almost certainly be strict. House arrest at a family, residence GPS, ankle monitoring, no contact with witnesses, restricted internet and phone use, mandatory. Check-ins with pre-trial services. Any violation of those terms could send her straight back to jail, a turning point in the case, regardless of the outcome. This bond hearing will set the tone for everything that follows. If Sarah is denied bond, the prosecution will head into trial with momentum and the image of a defendant the court deemed too risky to release. If she is granted bond, the defense will have won a small but powerful victory, proof that at least one judge believes Sarah can be trusted in the community while awaiting trial. Either way, the decision will be a pivotal moment in the legal saga of Sarah Grace Patrick, a case that began with shocking violence, spiraled into a bizarre social media spectacle, and now sits at the intersection of law, public opinion, and the future of a teenager accused of the unthinkable. The defense's position, a counter-narrative in high-profile murder cases. The prosecution and defense rarely agree on anything, but in the case of Sarah Grace Patrick, the gap between the two narratives is almost oceanic. On one side, prosecutors describe Sarah as a calculating young killer who murdered both of her parents and then used social media to stage a convincing performance of grief. On the other, her closest relatives say the police have made a catastrophic mistake, one that has already destroyed a family and may now cost an innocent teenager her freedom for life. Leading this counter-narrative are two men who have stood firmly by Sarah's side since her arrest: her biological father, Daniel Patrick, and her maternal grandfather, Dennis Nolan. Her father's unwavering defense when Sarah walked into the Carroll County Sheriff's office on July 8, 2025, to turn herself in. It wasn't alone. Her father, Daniel, was by her side, not just physically, but emotionally and publicly. From the very start, Daniel has been adamant Sarah is innocent. He has not shied away from cameras, microphones, or reporters. In interviews, he has expressed shock at the accusations and frustration with law enforcement's narrative. While the sheriff's office publicly touted a mountain of evidence tying Sarah to the murders, Daniel has openly mocked that claim. "If that's a mountain," he said, after reviewing a folder of evidence shown to him, "then I guess the Blue Ridge Mountains are just anthills." It was thin, really thin. For Daniel, this isn't just skepticism, it's outrage. The interrogation controversy, one of his loudest criticisms, centers on the way Sarah was questioned by police. According to Daniel, when investigators first spoke to Sarah, she was just 16 years old and was interrogated for hours without a lawyer or a parent present. If true, this could be a significant problem for the prosecution. Under US law, juveniles have heightened protections in interrogations, and questioning a minor without a guardian or attorney can lead to legal challenges, suppression of statements, or even dismissal of charges if misconduct is proven. Daniel has hinted that this interrogation produced statements the state now considers incriminating statements he believes were taken in violation of her rights. This issue, he says, will be a cornerstone of her defense, an alternative theory beyond poking holes in the state's case. Daniel has presented his own theory about what happened on the night of the murders. He believes the killings may have been connected to a drug-related dispute. This isn't speculation pulled from thin air. Daniel has pointed to past court filings involving individuals close to the family that reference substance abuse issues. He claims this history was overlooked or deliberately ignored by investigators, eager to close the case. Most controversially, he says there was evidence of forced entry on a door to the home, suggesting that someone broke in. This detail directly contradicts the police account, which has consistently stated there was no sign of forced entry, implying that the killer was someone who had easy access to the home. If Daniel's claim can be backed by physical evidence, it could shake the foundation of the prosecution's theory that Sarah, as a family member, was the only plausible suspect. The grandfather's grief and loyalty. Standing beside Daniel in this fight is Dennis Nolan, Sarah's maternal grandfather. His position is uniquely tragic. He is mourning the loss of his daughter while simultaneously defending the granddaughter accused of killing her. For Nolan, the idea of Sarah committing these murders is unthinkable. "I lost my daughter. That was hard," he told reporters. "And now, The thought of losing my granddaughter, that's just 10 times harder. Nolan doesn't mince words when describing the state's case. It's all speculative stuff. Nothing puts the gun in her hand. They don't have the gun. He sees the investigation as circumstantial at best, a narrative pieced together from assumptions, social media posts, and the fact that Sarah was present in the home. Phone calls from jail. Nolan has maintained contact with Sarah through jailhouse phone calls, and the emotional toll is obvious. He recalls one of her earliest calls. She sounded desperate, panicked. She asked me, "What are they doing to me? Why are they doing this to me?" I didn't do anything. For Nolan, these pleas are not the calculated words of a guilty mind. They're the cries of a frightened teenager who doesn't understand how she ended up in the middle of a nightmare. The united front together, Daniel and Nolan have formed a public alliance. They have appeared in interviews, attended court dates, and pushed their message on social media. Sarah is innocent, and the real killer is still out there. They have framed the investigation as narrow-minded, alleging that police locked in on Sarah early and built a case to fit that assumption rather than following every lead. This wrong suspect narrative is more than just public relations, it's also strategic. In high-profile trials, public perception can seep into the jury pool by consistently presenting Sarah as a victim of wrongful accusation. Her family hopes to plant seeds of reasonable doubt before the trial even begins. Potential defense strategies. While the defense has not laid out its full case publicly, the positions taken by Daniel and Nolan offer clues, challenging the evidence. Expect Sarah's lawyers to question the reliability, completeness, and interpretation of the state's mountain of evidence. They will likely demand full disclosure of all physical evidence, forensic reports, and digital data. Disputing the timeline, if Sarah's whereabouts at the time of the murders can be supported by phone records, witness statements, or other logs, the defense will use them to dismantle the state's version of events. Forced entry theory. Daniel's claims about a broken door could be introduced with photographs or expert testimony to suggest an intruder scenario. Interrogation violations. The defense will almost certainly file motions to suppress any statements Sarah made during that controversial interrogation, arguing they were obtained illegally. Lack of the murder weapon. Nolan's point that they don't have the gun could be a recurring refrain. The absence of the firearm weakens the chain of physical evidence, especially if no gunshot residue or DNA ties Sarah directly to the killings. The court of public opinion. Both Daniel and Nolan seem to understand that this case isn't just being tried in court, it's also unfolding in the court of public opinion. From Facebook posts to local news interviews, they have been deliberate in pushing back against the prosecution's portrayal of Sarah. In doing so, they've tapped into a broader skepticism of police investigations, especially in small towns where relationships and rivalries can sometimes influence decisions. Their messaging plays into an archetype familiar to many Americans, the idea of the wrong person behind bars while the real killer walks free. It's a story that resonates deeply, especially in the age of wrongful conviction documentaries and true crime podcasts. The emotional factor. For all the legal maneuvering, this case is saturated with raw emotion. Nolan's grief is palpable. Daniel's protective instinct is fierce, and Sarah's own desperation conveyed through her jailhouse calls and courtroom appearances is a constant reminder that the stakes are life-altering. If the defense can humanize Sarah in the eyes of jurors, portraying her as a scared teen rather than a remorseless killer, they will have taken a major step toward creating reasonable doubt. The risks of the defense narrative. But there are risks to this approach. If the prosecution can convincingly refute Daniel's forced entry claim, prove that no drug-related suspects existed, or show that Sarah's interrogation was legally sound, the defense narrative could crumble. Worse, if jurors feel that the defense is grasping at straws or misleading them, it could backfire, making Sarah look more guilty, not less. Looking ahead, as the bond hearing approaches, the defense's public campaign may double as an informal test run for their trial arguments. If the judge is swayed by the idea that Sarah is a victim of investigative overreach, or that the state's case has glaring holes, it could influence the decision on whether she awaits trial at home or in jail. If bond is granted, Daniel and Nolan's message gains momentum. If it's denied, they'll face the uphill battle of convincing a jury that their granddaughter and daughter is innocent while she sits behind bars. The counter-narrative being pushed by Sarah's family is more than just love and loyalty. It's a strategic, calculated challenge to the state's story. They are not merely asking the court to believe in Sarah. They are asking it to doubt everything else. And in a criminal trial, that doubt, if it takes root, can be the most powerful defense of all. So here we are, standing at the edge of two drastically different realities. On one side, law enforcement paints a chilling portrait, a teenage girl accused of the unthinkable, murdering her own parents, and then allegedly taking to TikTok to perform grief for the world to see. They cite what they call a mountain of digital evidence, pointing to messages, searches, and online behavior that, in their eyes, leave no doubt. On the other side, her father and grandfather reject that narrative entirely. They describe Sarah as a frightened, misunderstood teenager, not a cold-blooded killer. They insist the evidence is circumstantial at best, claim police ignored other viable suspects, and argue that her constitutional rights were trampled. During the investigation, somewhere between those two extremes lies the truth. But right now, that truth feels suffocated, buried under layers of social media optics, complex family dynamics, and deeply conflicting accounts. Sarah's upcoming bond hearing isn't just a legal formality. It's a pivotal moment that could decide whether she awaits trial behind bars or walks out into a world watching her every move. This case forces us to confront difficult questions. How much can we really trust the evidence we see online? How easily can grief or guilt be disguised in the age of social media? And perhaps the most unsettling thought of all, how well do we truly know the people closest to us? But now, I want to hear from you. Do you see her social media posts as calculated acts of deception, or simply the erratic expressions of a traumatized teenager trying to cope? Share your thoughts below. This case is far from over, and here on The Crime Chapter 1, we'll be covering every single twist and turn. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned. The next chapter could change everything.